Hi, I'm Sarah Lennox. I'm a member of the Northampton Neighbors Board, and I'm also a member of the Speaker Series Committee, which has put together this whole sequence of speakers that I hope you've seen many of. So let me tell you first a little bit about Northampton Neighbors. I know a bunch of you are members because I recognize you, but just in case for those who aren't. Northampton Neighbors is the group that's sponsoring this speaker series. It launched in November 2017, and as of today has 911 members, which we think is just terrific. We're an organization that's devoted to providing services and social and cultural events to assist seniors so they can stay in their own homes as they age. As you may know, we're part of what's called the Village Movement, virtual villages, which exist all over the country and even beyond in Australia and New Zealand. There's a village in Amherst, there's a village in Northfield, there's a village in Gill, there's a village in Whately. So if you don't happen to be from Northampton, just check around and there may be a village where you are too. So Northampton Neighbors is committed to providing services to people 55 and over living in Northampton. Anybody can join Northampton Neighbors, but to receive services, you need to be 55 and over and a Northampton resident. As you might imagine, or as you realize, those services have been pretty curtailed by the pandemic, but we're still doing our best to offer services. So we provide Hello Neighbor weekly check-in calls to any member who'd like them. We have a messenger project that pairs up our members and school children so they can become pen pals with each other. We still have interest groups going, like a gardeners group, a book group, and a discussion group on race in the US. Those are all being hosted on Zoom. And of course, this speaker series. You may know that this speaker series began in fall 2018, kicked off by Steve Harrell, who not only gave us a talk about ice cream, but provided us with ice cream. And those talks were held monthly in the Senior Center and were co-sponsored by the Senior Center. But of course that all stopped when the pandemic closed everything down. So, you know, I probably like everybody, we were sort of thrown for a loop for a while. And then we realized we could continue our talks on Zoom, and that was an important way to keep the Northampton Neighbors community going and overcome the isolation and boredom that so many of us are contending with right now. So since May, we've been hosting Zoom talks every 2 weeks. They've all been recorded thanks to our tech guru, Nina Kleinberg, who will be checking in now and again. And so if you miss them, they're all available on our website, northamptonneighbors.org. And for coming attractions, our next talk on August 28th will be photographer Paul Schewel, who's going to tell us about his adventures taking pictures locally and all around the world. So let me tell you what's going to happen today. Our speaker, Rebecca Starr, is going to speak for 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll take your questions using the chat function at the bottom of your screen. If you wiggle your mouse around or you wiggle your finger on the touchpad, chat will come up. What you do is type your question in chat, hit enter, and it'll be preserved, and then I'll read off the questions at the end of Rebecca's talk. You might want to wait until Rebecca's finished talking before you ask her questions, unless you really can't remember them, because we found that people ask questions and then the speaker actually addresses that later on in the talk. So, so you don't have to ask them. I should well, you are all muted right now. Only our Queen Nina Kleinberg can unmute you. But we will unmute you after we've dealt with all the questions on chat. Then we'll unmute you to see if any of you have any questions you want to ask in person. You might also notice something new at the top of your screen, Otter AI Live Notes. And what that is this kind of amazing thing that makes a transcript of the people as they're talking. So if you want to, if you'd like to see written out kind of closed captions of what's going on, just click on that and you can get that too. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the reason you're here today, which is Rebecca Starr. First of all, I want to thank Rebecca so much for speaking for us, because she's got really valuable information to give us, and we're all really eager to hear what she has to say. Rebecca is one of Northampton's newest treasures. She came to Cooley Dickinson Healthcare to be its medical director for geriatrics, which was a new department for Cooley Dickinson in July 2019. She's taught at Harvard Medical School, at the Tufts School of Medicine. She served as medical director of Medicare Advantage at Health New England, medical director of acute care for elders at Bay State Medical Center, and medical director of the program for all-inclusive care of the elderly at the Elder Service Plan in Cambridge. And she's won far too many awards and fellowships for me to mention them here. So she has an enormous wealth of experience in geriatrics, and that's what she's going to tell you about now in her talk called Being a Geriatrician, What I Do and Why I Do It. So turn this over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for that lovely introduction. Thank you to Northampton neighbors for working with me and having me here today, and Nina for the IT support. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. So I want to talk a little bit about being a geriatrician. I won't bore everybody with the objectives, but this is what I'm going to try to cover. I am going to hold off on questions until the end, if that's all right, unless there's some burning fire behind me or something. But I'll start off with a little bit of what is geriatrics, why I'm doing this, what it looks like. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Pioneer Valley Memory Care Initiative, or PVMCI, and then, of course, Northampton neighbors. So just a little bit of background history of geriatrics. Aristotle used the word eugeria, which means successful aging, and he wrote about this in his first book, defining it as a long and happy life in which independence was maintained and there was no pain or suffering. Well, I think that sounds beautiful, but we all know that the reality can be different. But we're certainly, as geriatricians, here to provide the best possible quality of life. So there's often some talk between gerontology and geriatrics, so I just wanted to clarify that. Gerontology is the study of aging, the biological, behavioral, and social science of aging. Dr. Metchnikoff was the one that came out with this in the 1800s. He thought that aging was caused by toxic bacteria in the gut and that lactic acid could prolong life, so he drank sour milk every day. And I just want to say, don't do that. That turned out not to be the case. So Dr. Nasher in 1909 first used the word geriatrics. So that's sort of when it came about. And then Dr. Marjorie Warren was considered the mother of geriatrics. She was a surgeon and a consultant in London at a hospital in 1935. She was given this 850-bed hospital filled with really, frankly, neglected older adults who had wounds and just were in terrible shape. The whole ward was painted dark brown apparently and was really dingy, and she turned it around. She started this detailed assessment of each person. She introduced team-based care. She transformed the environment to light and bright, and people loved coming to work every day. And she created what I do today, the comprehensive geriatric assessment. And you can see her goals really are my goals, you know, to prevent disease or getting worse, to reduce disability, to maintain the highest level of independence, and to teach people how to adjust to any disabilities they may have. And everything that she did is really fundamental to how we practice geriatrics today. So we do know that the older population is expected to grow quite rapidly. This is for a few reasons, a lot of reasons. We have great medical care. Our food supply we have refrigeration. We have vaccines, which have contributed so much. And we know that the population is gonna really get bigger, and you can see the numbers here. In 2020, 50 million, and in 2040, it's gonna almost double. Geriatrics as a field, I love it, and I feel blessed to be doing this. And I love coming to work every day. I can't ask for more than that. But there's not a lot of people going into it. We have 6,500 geriatricians in this country, when really we need close to 30,000. So if you know of anybody, convince them to go into geriatrics. It's a great field. So why did I become a geriatrician? I had the amazing luck to grow up with all four of my grandparents. And each one was very different and their own person in their own right. This is a picture of my grandma Anna. Excuse me. She was an opera singer and an interior designer, and loved she loved living, and she brought with it a tremendous grace, and she continued this grace as she got older. And even this is her around 93 or so. She had made her own suit, everything matched perfectly, and she brought, you know, to every day this great smile. She certainly had, excuse me, I'm so sorry. She certainly had losses and changes in her life to deal with, but she brought this amazing resilience that I hope to be able to share as I go and practice forward. So I'll talk a little bit about the age-friendly health system. This was actually started by the John Hartford Foundation and the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, or the IHI, which is a national movement to focus on the 4 M's. And the 4 M's really start with mentation, and that's mind, cognition, and mood, as well as delirium in the hospital. Mobility, so important, but sometimes it goes out the door when we're trying, if someone's in the hospital, we're trying to get meds in, procedures. There's a lot going on and the mobility can be lost. So very important. Medications, we always review the medications to make sure you're on the right medications, and then try to reduce medications that you either don't need to be on or shouldn't be on. And then what matters? And that's a 2-part question. What matters to you? For some people, it could be a good hot cup of coffee in the morning. That's what matters to me. Not most, but you know, certainly first thing in the morning. But really, you know, family, friends, whatever you think is important. It's important that we as providers know that as well too. And then the second part of that is advanced care planning. So that's the age-friendly health system. We're working to get that going in the hospital. We're actually going to start a pilot in September on one of the units. We were going to get going in March, but we know that COVID changed everything. And it's actually also how we practice in the geriatric clinic. So that's what's going there. Our goal is to become recognized, Cooley Dickinson Healthcare, as an age-friendly health system. I'll talk a little bit about our group, the Cooley Dickinson Medical Group Geriatrics. And I work with my amazing nurse, Sharon Asher, who, if you've met, she makes this geriatrics practice come to life. And it's been an amazing partnership. And so if you, for a referral, you can either refer yourself, you can get referred by your PCP or a specialist or someone in the area. It can depend really on what the indication is. And these are some of the reasons that we get the referrals or people want to come see a geriatrician. There might be some memory problems, concerns about a family member with memory problems. You might have difficulty walking. We do a really thorough medication evaluation. Some people call us complexologists. We're very good at managing multiple chronic conditions. Someone might have 10 or 15 conditions, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. So that's really where we feel comfortable. Multiple hospitalizations, increasing frailty, and frailty can come in different ways: physical, cognitive, or social frailty. Trouble sleeping is a big issue. And so I don't want to go on here, but other indications is helping to maintain and enhance well-being as one gets older. And I think that's a lot of what we do here as well. So what is a geriatric consultation? And you can see that, again, we're continuing this from what was started in the 1930s. We really do a thorough review. We're going to cover any new or existing problems as well as the well-being. And so we talk about what's been going on, where you were in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I really like to start at the beginning, and I actually ask where you're born and raised. And I like to hear where you went to school, what you did. It gives me a good sense of who you are, what's important to you, and helps me figure out where you want to go as well too, and what you want to accomplish. And we provide advice and, if appropriate, some additional tests. So we provide person-centered care. I think that's really important. We spend a good deal of time. The initial consultations can be anywhere from 60 minutes to 90 minutes. And we're very lucky that way that we have that time to spend. We ask a lot of questions, Some people love it. Some people are like, why are you asking this? But they're really important. We talk about your goals and problems, and looking at the goals and problems. And we also actually look at strengths as well too, to come up with a plan. We talk about function, and function is what we call activities of daily living. That is just everything you did from getting out of bed this morning, you transferred, you went to the bathroom, you got yourself showered and dressed, and you groomed, and you eat. Those are sort of the basic activities. And then there's the independent activities, things like food shopping, driving, and doing your finances and your medications. And we really look closely at that as well. We'll ask about sleep, ask about perhaps sleep apnea. We look at activity. How much are you able to do versus how much do you want to do? Sometimes those are two different things. A social history, we review the meds. We do a physical exam. People get worried. We look at feet, but we really don't take off clothes. We discuss goals of care and advanced care planning, and we put it all in the model of that 4M, that age-friendly health system model. We have a lot of resources, and we give recommendations. And the resources we have a lot of on memory impairment, caregiver support, meditation. We really are into nutrition and exercises. We know that these are the best things you can do, and they have a lot less side effects than medications. We want to make sure you have your estate planning done. We look at national resources, so we're always looking for more resources to sort of expand our library, if you will. And then us, and I think that's really important. if somebody comes in to see us, we really try to be there for them for questions. We try to help with referrals because it can be hard to be given a number when you're already feeling overwhelmed about things. And so we want to make sure that whatever we can provide to you to make your life a little easier and better, that we try to do that. So going back to Aristotle about that successful aging, I don't want anybody to feel unsuccessful if things don't go as they planned. I think that it's a hard word. We know what it means, but nobody should feel like they're failing. But what we do know that helps is physical activity. That's a huge thing. We also know that mental activity is huge. And that can be anything from reading, playing an instrument. I always talk about learning a language. That can be a little bit much, but it can really be anything that is aside from watching television. And not that that's bad, but our bodies and our minds were not meant to watch television all day. And there was this really interesting study that for an adult who spends an average of 6 hours a day watching TV, over the course of a lifetime, it actually decreases your life expectancy. Healthy diet, good sleep hygiene is huge, and we really try to work with that. Try to get people off sleep medications, and social interactions, of course. One thing that's on our brochure is, and I'm sure mispronounce it, is a Japanese word, Ikigai, which is a sense of purpose. And I really think that making sure you have a sense of purpose while you're younger is tremendously important. And as you get older, that's essential. And it might change, you know, it might be about kids or grandkids or what have you, but you really, it's hard to, you can't take a pill for it, but it really makes a big difference, I think. One thing we see is it's really important to plan ahead, to age in place. People say, I want to stay home, but we say that's a wish, that's not a plan. And you really need to make sure you plan out things as you change. If for some reason you were to fall and break an ankle, or how would you get around, right? If you couldn't drive. Who are your friends? Who's your activities? Do you have a Northampton neighbors, for example? And advanced care planning. And we can help with this plan, but we really think it's important to look at this. So in 2019, Jeff Harness led a few community health needs assessments, what we call CHNAs, in Northampton and Amherst. And they asked a lot of questions, and we had roundtable discussions. And I had the opportunity to go to one, I think even before I started, and it was just great to hear. And a lot of things came out, but areas of consensus were the goal to stay as independent and safely live in someone's home as long as possible. Social connections and network supports are as important as medical and mental health care. I thought that was just tremendously important and a great point, and need to be valued and involved in the community. And this goes to that sense of Ikigai. So I've always loved this. It's sort of, you know, talk about a village movement. This is why community matters. And we all know this. However, in our country, these social supports are not supported. And this has always made a big impression on me. Healthcare and social services spending. And in blue is the social expenditures. I'm sorry, in blue is the health service expenditures, and in green is the social service expenditures. So you can see at the top, France, they have way more money spent on social services. Same with Sweden. People that actually, they have, you know, this healthcare for all, if you will. They really spend more money on their social services, and I think it shows off with increased longevity and increased health. For us, you can see that's been swapped. So our social service expenditure is close to half of what we spend on medical expenditures. So that brings us back to the importance of community. We know that social connections are everything. And we know that they promote positive health-seeking behaviors. They slow cognitive decline. I thought that study was so that there was 70% less cognitive decline in people who had frequent social contact. And we know that it can really help decrease disability. So going back to that, what we know about social connections and that Chana report, I'm going to talk about the Pioneer Valley Memory Care Initiative. Just a little bit of background. I only came on, I think, in December, perhaps, of 2019, but it had been going on, a conversation with Northampton neighbors. Jeff Harness from Cooley Dickinson Hospital led the talk, and trying to come up with the right project to try to do things to help decrease social isolation and loneliness. And we had some great groups sitting at the table, and we're able to come up with this program, which I'm really excited about. Northampton Neighbors has given so much to this. And the goal of this program is to serve older adults living with memory loss, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease, and their families, caregivers, what we call a dyad. So the two people, the older adult with dementia and the family caregiver, who are living in Northampton, Leeds, and Florence. That's where we started for now. We certainly hope to expand on the program. And we provide some services. I'll go into detail in the next slide, but you have a geriatric consult, and then you get these connections to the community services. So the goals, again, is to support well-being, provide coordinated, individualized care, to look at the whole person, and really to support the family caregivers. We know that caregiver stress is huge. And if you've ever been one, you know it can really take over your life and make it hard to do all the things that you're supposed to do. Take care of yourself, take care of them, take care of your family, actually work. It can be quite consuming. And so we know that if we can support caregivers and reduce their stress, that the ones with dementia can live in the community longer. So this is the program. And our goals here are, as we said, again, we're really excited about this. And if you have questions, you can certainly email me, or that's a phone number that you can call as well, 582-2357. This program, we actually are working alongside Mass General Hospital. They have their own MCI program. And we're also using the care ecosystem model of dementia care, and this is based out of the UCSF Medical Center. They've had amazing outcomes. We work in sort of this model where we have great protocols and policies, and we have the support to both at UCSF and nationally. There's a monthly call. So we feel that this is a robust program, and we're so happy to have it. I just want to talk a little bit about PVMCI and Northampton Neighbors. We wouldn't have this program without Northampton Neighbors. They were at the table from the beginning. Again, I joined late, but from the minute I was there, I was so impressed with everything that everybody was bringing to the table. And I could certainly mention names. I'm afraid to leave anybody out, but Diane and Sarah, Kathy, Ken, Linda, Catherine, forgive me if I missed anybody. But they came to the table with experience, passion, and just a can-do attitude. We're going to make this happen. We've never done anything like this before. We don't have anything to go on, but really worked with us to create the program. So if we make, if they come see me or there's a referral, we do that initial assessment that you saw. We ask questions, and then we have a dementia care specialist who is now just starting to go out into the home if someone's comfortable with that. Otherwise, we can do Zoom or phone call, and really understand who that person is who has dementia, who's the person who's the family caregiver, and figure out how we can help them the best. And then we'll make referrals perhaps to the Alzheimer's Association. We have a caregiver program, and then a referral to Northampton Neighbors. And Northampton Neighbors has come up with their own protocols about this, and has come up with a list of activities. And we were really ready to start right when COVID hit and had to put everything on hold. But They've come back, we've all come back, and I think that this program is even more important now with COVID. So to everybody who was part of this, a sincere thank you. I feel blessed to be working with you. Just a couple more moments. Sarah, am I doing okay? I can't see a chat, so okay. I always like to do some public service announcements that we see as we're doing our consultations, and I think it's really important just for everybody to be aware of them. Financial scams. This is huge. I don't think Sharon and I realized what a big problem this was until we started hearing about it. We actually spoke to the Northampton District Attorney's Office about this. There's a lot of resources that are out there. Phone scams are the most commonly used. We also know that it's happening also on the internet. COVID's making it bigger. Don't donate anything without doing your homework or talking to somebody. And unfortunately, social isolation is the biggest risk factor, because if people are out together, they're talking, hey, I got this email from so-and-so, or I got this call. And of course, with COVID now, we know that unfortunately, social distancing can equal social isolation. So really be aware of this. We're asking about it a lot now and are really surprised at just how frequent this is. So that's the first. There's going to be 4 public service announcements. Alcohol and substance abuse. I think this really gets underestimated, especially even by people in the healthcare system. We can bring somebody into the hospital and then in a couple days they're completely delirious, and it turns out that they're withdrawing from alcohol we didn't know was a problem. So just to be aware how much of an issue this is. And it might not have been an issue when somebody was younger, and now it gets worse. And now it becomes an issue, or as there's more isolation, it becomes an issue. So I just want people to be aware of that. Again, chronic pain treated with opioids. We know what an issue that's becoming. You certainly need your pain treated, but it's that balance. We now have INSA, and marijuana is legal, and everybody seems to think it's great to use CBD treats everything apparently. I just want to say that there are actually I don't know of really any evidence-based studies on this yet, and we've certainly seen people become quite confused and delirious and increased risk of falls. So I don't want anybody to be in pain, however, or whatever. Just be very wary of this. It's not the cure-all, unfortunately. COVID-19, we know what a big issue this is. I won't talk about it at length, but we do know that social isolation is huge. Northampton Neighbors, Diane, I think, has been making phone calls, and there's a lot of outreach, and this is where something like a village program is huge. There's also the senior center. You can see what everybody's doing. There's still ways to walk around, have social distance, outside events, small with a couple people, but make sure that you're getting your exercise, both physical and mental. Hopefully this is not going to go on forever. I want to talk a little bit about ageism. This is the last point I want to make. It's prejudice or discrimination on the grounds of person's age. And I think it's much more apparent in our country. There was a study with China versus America, and even hard of hearing. And in China, there was much less ageism. And if you are hard of hearing, actually, or you didn't have hearing growing up, again, much less ageism. But in our country, we know that it certainly is a big deal. I think it's important to remember that it affects everything. We have Medicare, but Medicare doesn't cover important things like hearing aids and dentists and dentures and glasses. And that's one thing that we all need to advocate for. We also really need to advocate to have more older adults in these, any medical studies. As a doctor, we use evidence-based medicine, but there's really nothing on anybody if you're 80 and older, and particularly if you have multiple chronic conditions. And so you're having to make these choices about should you be on a medication or not, or should you get this or not, but we have no evidence to back it up. So I think it's really important to be aware of how we talk. I hear sometimes, well, you know, it's a senior moment, but I want to make sure that we all know that our memory should, you know, things change for sure, but I don't think that you should ever think that memory loss is something normal. And again, just something to be aware of. So those are my 4 public service announcements. This is my grandmother when she turned 100 with my dad and my aunt. And she really, again, I'm so lucky to have them as role models and to be able to work with Northampton neighbors and Cooley Dickinson VNA and everybody here. So thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Rebecca. That's really wonderful. Oh, I learned so much. That's really terrific. So we're gonna, if you have questions now, you can write them in the chat. And before we go to the questions, there's gonna be a little word from your sponsor. I need to encourage you all to be part of the give and take safety net that Northampton Neighbors is committed to. You know that because Northampton Neighbors believes that we should be good. We should have provide access to everyone and make everyone welcome in our organization. We have no fees, but that doesn't mean we don't have expenses. And one of our major expenses is our wonderful director, Diane Porcella. So we need to pay her. So if we would like to encourage you to donate to keep this terrific organization going. So here's the, you go to the website, northamptonneighbors.org, and we especially encourage you to become a sustainer and give as much as you can every month. And that lets us calculate that we have enough going forward. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to go to the chat. Okay, so here are 2 questions. Do you provide service, referrals, or both? And what fees are associated with your services?
All right, so that's regarding the geriatric consultation. Well, we provide the service. For sure, we do the full exam. So it's like going to any consultant. We do referrals as well too, based on what we feel like is needed, a VNA referral, neurology, neuropsych, labs or imaging. And then we really try to have good follow-up for whatever time we feel is necessary. As far as fees, everything is covered under Medicare, so it's a specialist visit.
Okay, here's a hard one. Could you please give some suggestions about the stubborn family member resistant to clarity or open to change? Resistant.
Is a great question. If anybody has any tips, I'm happy to take them from my own mom. That's it can be really tough. I think we should all think about ourselves, how we would take advice, right? And are we always welcome to it? Think about what the resistance to change is. Is it fear? Is it comfort? And maybe ask those questions. It can be really frustrating, and it's just important to know most likely it's not personal. Back away and come back, bring some resources. Sometimes that can help. And sometimes, for better, for worse, things just have to play out.
Okay, here's another one. Can you please define ETOH and mentation?
Sure, my apologies. It's like being in the military with all the abbreviations. ETOH is alcohol use, and mentation is your mind, how you're thinking.
Okay. That's all the questions in the chat. Do we want to unmute Nina and see if people,
I
people-
think what I'm going to I'm going to allow people to unmute themselves.
Okay, good. Oh, here's one more question in the chat. Oh, a couple more questions. Okay. Do you serve as a primary care doctor?
I have in the past. Here again, because of the shortage of geriatricians, I'm here as a consultant. So,
could you provide hints to change how one communicates with a person with a memory deficit, i.e. don't say remember when or whatever?
yeah, I think that's a great question. You can certainly go to, there's a few places, Alzheimer's Association has some information on communication. There's someone else, and I'm blanking on her name, the 10 sort of rules. Number one, I think, not saying remember. Don't correct them. Somebody who has memory deficits, their reality is their reality. And so if you're correcting them and always saying that they're wrong, that's a really hard place to be. Nobody wants that. So I think that's really important. We talk about gentle fiblets. You don't always need to tell everybody the truth. Let me rephrase that. If they're remembering something differently than the way you're remembering that, that's okay, as long as nobody's in any danger. And it's okay to go along with that, if that makes any sense. If they're repeating themselves, that can be frustrating. But again, just, keep giving them the answer. And again, Alzheimer's Association has great resources for that.
Here's another interesting question. Can you schedule a consultant visit before you have dementia or disabilities?
Sure, absolutely. So that's to the point. If you have questions about how to enhance your well-being, I think if you're whatever age and you're running, however many miles a day, you're doing what Dr. Fossey's doing, you probably don't need a geriatric consultation. But if you have questions or you want to plan, some people have a visit, check in, and then say, okay, I've got what I need. And, if anything comes along, I know where you work, sort of thing. The other thing about the memory deficit that I want to get to is sometimes it is hard to remember things. You can try using a schedule or writing things on a whiteboard, but even if people forget that, I think not stressing over it too much is really important.
Here's a lovely reminder to all of us. My watchword is to be kind, which I think is wonderful. Someone is asking, will the transcription be available after the Zoom ends? Nina?
I will attempt to make it so.
Nina is a magician, so probably if she thinks it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen. That's all we have on the written question. So Nina, you want to explain what to do now? If
anyone wants to ask a question, they have to unmute themselves. And if they unmute themselves, they now have that ability. It looks like Ken has unmuted himself.
It's actually Anne.
With Ken. Hello. It says Ken, but
she's always unmuting herself.
I'm wondering, Rebecca, if you could talk a little bit about what's involved in a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and when if somebody's concerned about that, what would be the proper way to proceed, do you think?
Sure, great question. I think if somebody's concerned about it, we always ask that a family member or a close friend comes on the visit, and we'll ask both, the questions. I think it's looking at changes. Where were you prior? Everybody has a different level of education, and it doesn't matter who you are, but what the change has been. Has it been some sort of decline? Are you struggling to find words? And sometimes we all are. I'm terrible with names. I just want everybody to know that now. So later on down the line, you can say that's not a change, right? So it's important really to know where you are now versus what has changed. How is this affecting your day-to-day life? And we talk about those IADLs. I'm using that abbreviation, but we talk about finances, medications, driving, cooking, cleaning. If you've noticed any change in that, people aren't able to sequence things. Those are, that's really what we look for. And that's why we do the full assessment to say, what were you doing versus what are you doing now? We start there. And then we want to make sure that there's no other sort of, I'm using this word reversible, but nothing reversible cause. We check vitamin levels, B12, folate, we check a thyroid level. We want to make sure that we do your medication review and make sure you're not on medications that could be affecting the way you think. Anticholinergic medications, even something as simple as Benadryl, could really affect your memory. So we do all of these things first to make sure that there's nothing else that's contributing. And once we take away all those things and it doesn't seem to be an issue, then we really take a history, we take a family history and see, did your parents or siblings have anything that's similar? We generally get head imaging if it seems to be consistent with someone's goals of care. And we'll often then do a little more cognitive testing, either in our office or neuropsych testing. And we use all of that to put together a diagnosis. There's no blood test, unfortunately. That's what makes it more complicated, but that's what we use. And so we take we're never going to be 100% sure, but we sort of say, it seems like this is most likely. Does that help answer your questions?
Other questions?
I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. Because I know there's many types of dementia, and I was just wondering how you sort out, between various types of dementia.
Absolutely. We really look to see what's going on, where the memory loss is, if there's any other findings, if you're having some Parkinson-like movements, if you're having trouble walking, if your personality has changed. We also look to make sure your depression, if you have depression and anxiety, that those are controlled as well as possible, because those can really affect how someone thinks.
Other questions?
I answered everything.
You answered everything. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yes, here's one down here.
My question is, there was a time, I have Parkinson's, and there was a time when transcranial magnetic stimulation was proposed as a way to counteract the cognitive issues that occur with Parkinson's. And now I see that that's discounted because it says it's simply moving dopamine around, but there's still the same amount of dopamine available, whether or not you have transcranial magnetic stimulation.
That's an excellent question, and we certainly have people who have Parkinson's here, but I'm not an expert on that, so I can always look it up and get back to you, but I'm going to defer that question to the people who know more about that than I do.
Well, thank you for the link.
Sure.
Someone's asked if you could please repeat the phone number.
Sure. I don't laugh, but I don't know it by heart myself, so 582-2357. And you can, if you have questions, you can always call our geriatric practice as well too. That number that I just gave you is for the Pioneer Valley MCI program, but for a geriatric assessment, the phone number is 585-0755. Once again, that's 585-0755.
Anyone else? Well, I think we can thank Rebecca for this talk that is so full of information and so useful for all of us because, as you say, Rebecca, you know, aging is going to happen to, well, if we're lucky, aging, or maybe aging has already happened to all of us, so, or many of us anyway. So, and let's hope it keeps happening and keeps happening in a way that's, what's that word from Aristotle?
The successful aging is that
What is that word? It's something with an E. Eugeria, yes.
Geria, sorry.
Let's hope we all have eugeria. So thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you so much for all of you for being here. And don't forget about Northampton Neighbors when you think about donating. And let me remind you again that our speaker in 2 weeks is going to be Paul Schul talking about his wonderful photographs. So goodbye, everybody. And thank you again, Rebecca.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.